So, have you guys ever heard of a game called Way of the Samurai 3? It's the third installment of the Way of the Samurai series, developed by Acquire and released back in 2008. Now, I've played Way of the Samurai 1 and 2 plus Western on the PS2, but I got no idea where my CDs and consoles are at this point, so I can't get the footage for those. Back when I was a teenager, my family couldn't afford a PS3, so despite seeing Way of the Samurai 3 released, I simply sat back and wished I could have played it. Luckily, Ghostlight Interactive decided to release the game on PC, and I get to play it. Once you press the new game button, you're treated to an exposition of how the situation currently is in Amana. And unlike most of the games in the series, which tends to be set in more recent times, Way of the Samurai 3 happens to take place in the Japanese Warring States period. Gist of the plot is that Fujimori Shuzen, vassal of the Sakurai clan, had overthrown his lord and is now the ruler of Amana. The protagonist happens to be the survivor of a giant battle, and the story begins as he aimlessly hobbles around the remains of a battlefield. Even a few minutes into the game, this game already shows its, in my opinion, best quality. It's the freedom to do whatever you want. I like how this game gives me the option to act like a psychopath and draw my sword at two concerned peasants who saw me dying slowly. Now, most folk aren't going to do that, so you'll probably pick one of the three dialogues presented and immediately collapse. You then wake up in Tagatane village and the person who seems to be the elder immediately tells you to fuck off. You're now thrown into the open world of Amana and are free to do whatever you wish. There's three factions in the game: Fujimori clan, Oka clan, and Tagatane village. Sort of a recurring theme within the series, as it usually revolves around the conflict between two sides and the neutral one that suffers from the conflict itself. How the story progresses largely depends on whether you participate in an inkling, and whether a location has an inkling or not can be seen on the map. However, unlike other games in the series where time stays at a stasis unless you do an action like finishing a job, doing an event, or other things, here it moves in real time. I must say that for a game of this nature, I prefer the event and job approach to pass time instead, since Way of the Samurai doesn't have the mechanics that intertwine with real time. Perhaps if it was a survival game, it would make more sense. Funny thing about the story progression is that you mostly progress based on how quickly you go through inklings instead of what day the game is currently in. So in the end, I do think that the real-time mechanic doesn't really add anything and merely inconveniences the player. I don't plan on talking about the story too much since it's mainly for the player themselves to find out. As for how you navigate to the inklings, you either run to the location manually or teleport to it through the map. The maps themselves tend to be more drawn out in terms of space, instead of the cramped Edo period cities you see in the second and fourth edition of the game. Hence, it is fortunate that the run speed is faster than the ones in previous entries of the series. For combat, I think Way of the Samurai 3 has the hardest one, since swings go a lot faster here. Which is why, if you guys find the combat overwhelming, my tip is to go to Amana Castle, talk to the guy in the blue outfit and ask to join the Fujimori clan. Then they'll start the audition where you kill every other contestant. Now, in this whole chaos, there is one contestant that carries this particular type of spear. Get it immediately. After that, try to survive, or if you're good, kill off all the other contestants for extra money. After you're done, you want to do odd jobs for either Omiki Town or Tagatane village. The money earned should be spent upgrading the spear and buying food so you can recover health mid-fight. Once you've neared the last days of Amana, you are to simply leave it by pressing Leave Amana on the map. Money and weapons carry over every playthrough in a single save. Keep that in mind. Now, in Way of the Samurai, there is no such thing as people ganging up on you at once. Every enemy soldier will honorably attack you one by one, which is a good thing for you since people don't block hits if they're not engaged with you. This means a horizontal cleave attack can hit several targets at once, at the cost of rapidly increasing your durability gauge to breaking point. There's also this push and pull mechanic that the game implements. If you push someone in neutral guard, you can force him to give you an opening. If you pull someone when they do a push attack, they will leave themselves open to counterattacks. But if you pull someone and they are not doing a push attack, you will be open to attacks. Very much a throwback to the first iteration of the game, but I'm not very fond at how push, pull and neutral light attacks do not have differing animations like how they used to in Way of the Samurai 1. Still, I think the best part about combat that the third game added to the series as a whole was the introduction of spears as its own weapon class instead of it being a side stance, like how it was in the second game. It was considered by the devs as a bit too OP though, hence why the damage of the weapon class seems a lot lower in the fourth installment of the series. There's also the parry and match mechanic, but it's more of an optional thing than something you must absolutely learn to win fights in the game. For the partner system, I don't think they're necessary for the game, as enemies fight you one by one in the first place. If anything, they just seem to be extra burden for the player since there's always the chance that they engage a boss and may even die. Not all companions can keep up with a player's running speed as well, further increasing their liability. Audio-wise, I think the game has decent enough of a soundtrack list to make it passable. Although I'm not fond of hearing the battle theme of the game being used for both small fry fights and also minigame jobs. Very nice of the developer though, to give players the option to either use Japanese or English voiceovers. For non-cutscenes, the game prefers to just let you hear snippets of grunts and few words instead of full sentences, which is something I'm okay with. Sort of reminds me of how it is in the Yakuza series of games. Graphically speaking, it's not impressive for a game of its era. The overall art style of the game is very similar to how it was in the PS2 installments of the series, but with improvements here and there. If there's one good thing to come out of this, it would be the very low performance requirement it has. Now, to conclude, is Way of the Samurai 3 something I recommend to most of you here? No. If you guys want to have a taste of the series, it's better to start from the fourth instead, since story-wise it's all unrelated. A newcomer to the series would enjoy the sheer amount of quality of life improvements 4 has, plus the customization the game allows. I reviewed this one since it's the most radically different installment of the series. Even then, it's $20 and can be even cheaper if you buy it during a season sale, so no huge loss. That's everything I have to say about the game. I hope you all enjoyed watching this video and, as always, have a great time.